This week's Bible reading has been in Acts chapter 14. There's something very encouraging that we see from Paul in this chapter that I want to look at this evening. And it has to do with the cities that he's traveling to and from. In verse 1, Paul is in Iconium, and he hears of an attempt that's going to be made on his life. People there are wanting to try to kill him. In our Bible Reader's Companion Commentary, which Ben gives to us throughout the week. If you're not watching those are posted on our Facebook, YouTube, and our website. There's a shameless plug for those. Go ahead and watch those. But Ben pointed out to us this morning from this chapter that sometimes Paul had to use wisdom to know when to flee dangerous situations. But at the same time, he did not let these dangerous situations that he fled from stop him from doing the work of the Lord. He went out and he continued teaching. And in this case, he left Iconium and went to Lystra. And in verse 19, we see that unfortunately for Paul, fleeing Iconium didn't keep him safe. Notice what happened here in verse 19. While trying to preach the gospel, the crowd had been persuaded by the people from Antioch and Iconium, and they turned on Paul. Now here in Lystra, in verse 19, they stoned him and dragged him out of the city, supposing him to be dead. But Paul survived this attack, and he fled Lystra and went on and continued preaching elsewhere. Almost getting killed multiple times for preaching the gospel is a pretty admirable thing already, but notice what Paul does after some more traveling. In verse 21, it says, after he preached to that city in Derbe, he had made disciples there. He then returned to Lystra, to Iconium, and to Antioch. Paul is heading back to the city where he was just stoned for preaching the gospel. He's also going back to Antioch and Iconium, where the people lived who tried to kill him for preaching the gospel. And he's going back there to preach the gospel. Verse 22 says that he returned to strengthen the brethren there and to encourage them, and he likely did more teaching there. I don't know about you, but if I were Paul, I might be a little bit afraid to show my face in those three cities. But Paul was persistent. He was determined, and he cared for the people's souls that were in those cities. He wasn't going to let something like attempted murder get in his way. For us, that can make us feel one of two things. Hopefully, it can encourage us to be more like Paul. But I think it could also sometimes make us, or at least me, feel shameful. What I mean by that is I let things prevent me from doing the work of the Lord that are much less negatively impacting than threats on my life. And not only do I let this stop me from maybe teaching someone a second time if they've reacted negatively, sometimes I can let the fear of it overcome me and I don't even try the first time. I think we all find ourselves in these situations. It's very easy to become fearful of situations where people may react negatively to what we have to teach them. We need to be more like Paul in this chapter. Yes, we need to use wisdom and potentially flee dangerous situations, but often the situations that we find ourselves fearful of are not always as dangerous as what Paul was facing. Most of us aren't facing death in our day-to-day jobs and activities and these opportunities that we find to teach people. I don't want to diminish the negative impact of what we will go through. It doesn't feel good when people make fun of us. It doesn't feel good when someone chooses no longer to talk to us. But in these situations, our lives aren't at stake. And we can definitely say that what we will face is nothing compared to us or those other people losing their souls. This is the perspective that we need to keep. People's souls are on the line. Road bumps along the path of saving people's souls are bumps that are worth hitting because there may not be a smoother path. In response to the negative things that happened to him, Paul said in verse 22 that it's only through many tribulations that we will enter the kingdom of God. He wasn't surprised or fearful of people's reactions to his teaching. and we shouldn't be either. Let's be as persistent and as determined as Paul was to bring people to the Lord. Maybe tonight you are fearful. Maybe it's you're fearful of taking on Christ in baptism. Tonight I encourage you to put off the fear and to put on Christ. Or maybe you have other trials or issues in your life that you fear taking on alone. You don't have to be fearful, and you don't have to be alone. Let us help you tonight. Tonight, if you need prayers or assistance of any kind, come forward as we stand and as we sing.